Hey, how you doing today? Great. Hey, I thought we would rank Queens of the Stone Age today, their entire discography. Queens of the Stone Age, one of the most legendary um, stoner rock outputs of the 90s and early 2000s. Josh Homme and company over the years went from Nick Oliveri, Dave Grohl, Mark Lanigan, and now we've got Dean Tortilla and Troy Van Lugen and all these other guys. Um, they've made a pretty remarkable discography over the years, and I thought it'd be fun to rank them today. So we've got again another tier list fashion. Thank you for joining me again on Toon Talk today. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting off with their debut album from 1998 or 99, one of those two, I believe. I'm not very good with album years, but whatever. This is a great debut. This really is a great way to start the band. It's very different from what they would go on to be, which is the way with most debuts. This feels more like a Caius album rather than a Queens of the Stone Age album, because this was right after the end of Caius and where Josh Homme went from that band and into forming his own group with the former bassist of Caius Nick Oliveri, and they formed this little mini group. And this is where they made their debut. They're known for being, of course, stoner rock because it's laid back and it's vibey and all that. And they originally recorded in the California desert, I believe. And it's just a really cool album. It's very, very abrasive and heavy from start to finish. And even though it doesn't really sound a whole lot like what they would go on to do, I think that's what makes it so unique. You've got some amazing songs on here like Avon and If Only, Walking on the Sidewalks, Mexicola, and then you've got some underrated songs in my opinion, like the instrumental Hispanic Impressions, which I think is pretty badass, and is one of the band's most underrated songs in general. There are of course some low points, like I'm not a big fan of Spiders and Vinegaroons, or however the hell you pronounce that word, but low points aside, I think it's a pretty damn good way to start their career. And they basically made the band already knowing, like it was already made fleshed out, because the band had already been in a band previously. Josh Homme and Nick Oliveri, they knew what they were doing before they made this, and it shows. And I think for that, it's a pretty commendable album. I don't think it's near their best, but I would say it's deserving of like a nice B tier, kind of middle of the road. I will say one thing is the bass on these tracks is probably the best that the bass sounds in any of their records. I would say that's like the biggest high point. And then let's talk opener wise. Regular Jean isn't one of their best openers, but it is pretty good. And then I Was a Teenage Hand Model, the closer, is probably their worst or second worst closer. Just doesn't really do a whole much, and that's that second half of the song where it's just like a bunch of noise, doesn't do anything for me. But still a pretty good debut album, I would say. And then moving on 2 years or 1 year later, in the year 2000, we have Rated R, their sophomore record, which I believe to be a pretty major step up from their debut. I think that this album is a classic. I think that it does everything that the debut did, but better. And just there's so much more dynamic like work between the group with Josh Homme and Nick Oliveri. They sound so much more in sync with each other than they did on the debut. Not that the debut sounded like off, but it sounds so much better. The production, in my opinion, is way better. There's way more use of different instrumentation on this one. That's one issue I do have with the debut, is that it sometimes can sound like a little repetitive, but not on Rated R, not in the slightest. The opener, Feel Good Hit of the Summer, is just a freaking banger. Just repeating, a list of drugs, and just having that be the entire duration of the song. It's very like campy and very like silly, but it's very creative in my opinion. I think it's a pretty good way to start. I wouldn't say it's anywhere near their best opener, but it's a fun way to start, and it's definitely one of their more iconic songs, I would say. Um, Moving on, of course, there's Leg of Lamb, which is just another goofy little track. You've got Autopilot, which is one of my personal favorites from the early issues of the band, or the early times of the band. Better Living Through Chemistry is great. And then after that is where I'm going to get a little controversial, but I'm not a big fan of the second side. I really am not. The first half is amazing. The second half for me really drags. All of the tracks with Nick Oliveri, I do not really like that much with him singing, which is weird because he has a phenomenal song that he sings on their next album that came out. But I really do not like the songs he sings on here. Which those being, God, I always forget the name of them because they're so generic. But yeah, just the songs he sings, are just whatever. Lightning Song 2, I mean, I don't really know what the point of that song is. Didn't really need to be on the record, but it is what it is. I do love In the Fade. I think that saves the second half. In the Fade is a phenomenal song. Just so moody and so emotional, and I love that about it. And it's really a standout on the second side because there really is not much else like it. On the second side of the record, the second side is way more aggressive and abrasive. And then it has the reprise at the end of Feel Good Hit of the Summer, which is pretty cool. And then we have the closer, which is I Think I Lost My Headache. I hate this song. I do not like it at all. I really do not. I like the first half. I really do. I like the first half a lot. The first half of the song is probably the most similar to their debut in its sound, which is really cool. But then the second half is just the same freaking horn loop over and over again for like 4.5 minutes or some crap, and it sucks. Why would you close the album that way? Like, the very first time I ever listened to Rated R, which was, God, years ago, I saw how long the closer was, and I was like, yes, oh my god, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be a super long closer, and it's going to go so many places, and then the horn intro, or the horn outro just started kicking in, and I was just like, what the hell am I listening to? Not a fan at all. So it might sound like I'm hating on this record pretty hard, which isn't true. I definitely think it's like the most mixed bag album of theirs. Like, probably their second most mixed bag. The highs are really, really high, and the lows are pretty low, which isn't really like a lot of Queen's albums. I think most of their albums stay pretty consistent in quality. But just for the highs alone, I'm going to go ahead and give it a B tier. It's got a great opener. I wish the closer was better. It's probably my least favorite closer that they have, sadly. Either that or I Was a Teenage Hand Model, one of those two. And it's just a shame because I know everyone praises this album, everyone gives it an A tier, some give it an S tier. But there's just too many tracks weighing it down for me. Especially Nick Oliveri's 2 tracks. That's what it is. Quick and to the Pointless. And then the other one that I always forget the damn name of. I've listened to this album dozens of times, and I still can't remember the other song he sings. Oh, I didn't even mention the damn singles. There's the first one, which is The Lost Art of Keeping a Secret. That one's okay, and then Monsters in the Parasol is fine too. I really think the singles on this one are just kind of bleh as well. But hey, still a good album. Still a good album. I just do not think it is as good as most of the other Queen's community says it is. Next up is Songs for the Deaf, 2002 record. Probably their biggest album, I would say, for its singles and just in general. And there's no doubt that this album is phenomenal. I mean, you go to like any hard rock list of like the top hard rock albums of all time, I mean, this is going to be on there. It's going to be pretty damn high, and for good reason. It is stellar. This is one of the most hard-hitting albums you will ever hear. The drums sound amazing and so bombastic and Just, oh, they're so great. The bass is phenomenal. The guitar playing from Josh Homme is fantastic. The lyrics are a step up. The vocals are great from everybody. Everyone does an amazing job. It is a 10 out of 10 record in my opinion, no questions asked. And hey, I'm a pretty big Queens fan. Don't know if you see that. Got the tattoo. So yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of them, and I'm a pretty big fan of this album. Definitely going in the S tier, and let me explain why. This album is a concept album, and it has one of my favorite concepts out of any album I have ever seen. Very, very unique, which I love. It is about basically about a road trip through the desert and going through the different radio stations trying to find a good song to listen to, which I can relate to heavily. I've been on tons of car rides and car trips that I just there was one time where I forgot to bring my CD case on one, and finding something to listen to on the radio was criminal. It was impossible. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really cool concept that's executed, I'd say, really well throughout the album. Opener Millionaire is amazing. This is the track I was talking about with Nick Oliveri singing, and his screaming on this is just such an awesome way to open it, and it sets the tone of the album really well. Then there's their biggest song, No One Knows, which is the second track. Don't need to say anything about that. Everyone knows that song. It's phenomenal. And then basically from there on out, besides for like one or two low points, it's that consistent quality the whole time. You've got Song for the Dead, which has a stellar opening, it probably has the best opening of like any Queen song, or not, if not any, then like one of their best openings to a track of theirs. And I just love how at the end of the track it comes back and it does the same thing again, except even more loud and abrasive, which is awesome. You have The Sky Has Fallen, which is a longer track that's more moody, which is great. There's Go With The Flow, which is phenomenal. There's Hanging Tree. You've got God Is In The Radio. You've got Song for the Deaf. I mean, there's so many good songs. The hidden track Mosquito Song at the end, which is technically the closer, one of their best closers. Don't even need to say anything about that. There's just, I mean, you can't go wrong with Songs for the Deaf, man. The only two tracks I'm not as big on are Six Shooter, which is not a big deal because it's kind of just meant to be kind of an interlude track, and then Do It Again, which is still a good song. I just don't think it's as good as the rest of the album. But despite those, it's still a 10 out of 10 record, in my opinion. A outstanding achievement in rock music, in hard rock, stoner rock, garage rock, any of those. This is a standout, and it is definitely on my 10 out of 10 list. I love this album to death, and I can't praise it enough. Then moving on to their 2005 record, Lullabies to Paralyze. And this album is a bit of a change of pace for the band. Their previous two albums, or previous three I should say, had a very large and like upbeat sound all the way through. This one's way more moody, it's way more like methodical, and I think that's a good thing because it makes Lullaby stand out in a good way. The opener, Medication, is one of their weaker openers, but it's pretty short and it leads into, this Lullaby and Medication, they kind of go hand in hand. And they're fine. They're not anywhere near one of their best openers, but they're still pretty good. Then you've got Everybody Knows You're Insane, which is great. And after that, just a bunch of very like eerie tracks, like Burn the Witch and Someone's in the Wolf, which is one of my favorite songs of theirs, and it's one of their longer tracks. And I think that's one where the length is a good thing because it builds up over time, and then has a big climactic ending, which I love. And then, I mean, there's so many good songs. There's Little Sister, which is one of their biggest singles, and of course that song is great. And then you've got the closer, Long Slow Goodbye, which is a personal favorite of mine, even though I will admit it's not one of their best, but I love it just because I love the very end where it has the horns come in. It just sounds so like, I don't know, it sounds like something you play at a funeral or something. It's just very, very emotional, if I could say. I've probably used that word a million times already, but that's just how I say it. But yeah, Um, this album does have low points, definitely way more than Songs for the Deaf. I mentioned Medication, which is just kind of okay. There's a You Got a Killer Scene There Man, which I'm not a big fan of at all. There's Skin on Skin, which probably has Josh Homme's worst lyrics of all time. So unbelievably cringy. Just, I cannot listen to that song without wincing. Besides those two, there's a couple more low points, but not enough to like really be worth mentioning them. And I still think Lullabies to Paralyze is a very good album. I've listened to it tons of times. It has amazing highs like Little Sister and Someone's in the Wolf and Long Slow Goodbye, along a list of tons of others. And for that reason, I think it deserves an A tier. Definitely like it more than these two, even though these two are still good. Next up, Era Vulgaris. So I don't want to be personal with this list because it is my favorite band of all time. So if this was a personal list, this would be right there. But we are not going to be personal. We are going to look at this in a critique way. I'm going to critique it, look at it from a normal listener's perspective. And this album is raw. It is rough around the edges, but on purpose. And the main reason it's my personal favorite is, one, because it was the first Queen's album I ever heard. I listened to it right before Like Clockwork came out, and I fell in love with it. And two, just because I love how experimental and weird it is. I love that it's not afraid to go places that no other Queens of the Stone Age record goes, which I love. But looking at it from a critical perspective, a lot of the songs are just kind of rough and not in a good way. This album definitely has some strange production decisions that I won't go too far into. But, man, the good songs on here, they cannot be underestimated. You've got Turn It on the Screw, the opener, which is, oh my god, it's so freaking good. It's so good. The build-up in the middle is freaking amazing. Love that track. 666, which is one of their weirdest songs, is awesome. Probably the best single on it. I'm Designer is one of the weaker songs, but not a bad thing. Into the Hollow is great. And then track 5, Misfit Love, is my favorite Queen song of all time. It's the very first one I ever heard, and the first time my dad played it in the car, my mind was blown. Could not believe what I was hearing. It was like a freaking orgasm in my ears. I was just like, what is this? And it's really the song that got me into music. Like, without that song, I would not be knowing as much about music as I do today. And it is my favorite song of all time. As silly as that might be of a pick, but it's my own personal opinion. I'm my own person. No one picks for me. That is my pick. And I really cannot praise that track enough. It has the best opening of any song of theirs, and one of my favorite openings to any song ever. And the rest of the track is just as good, followed by also one of the best closings to one of their tracks of all time. It's just amazing. It's phenomenal. And then there's Battery Acid, which is a heavy hitter that I really do like. And then probably one of my most controversial opinions is Make It With Chew, which I do not like. I do not think it fits on the album at all. I do not know why it is here. It fits more on Lullabies to Paralyze, in my opinion, and I do not think it fits with the production styles and sound of this album at all. 3s and 7s is great. There's no talk there. Suture Up Your Future is phenomenal. Another one of my favorite closing portions of a track on that one. River and the Road, which I love how chaotic that track is. And then it closes with Run Pig Run, which I do not think was a good choice for a closer. I wish they chose something more like methodical or like emotional like they usually do. But it's still a great song, still banging. I love that track still. And on the bonus tracks version, the closer is actually what the hell is that song called? Running Joke is actually the closer, which I think is a better pick for a closer if it was a little longer. But yeah, I mean, it's Era Vulgaris. It's great. I love it. And even from a critiquing point, I would still put this in the A tier. There are still tons of tracks to enjoy. There's just so much to love about it, and even though it's a little rough around the edges, I think that helps the album stand out more. I really do. And that's why I'm going to give it an A tier. I'm not going to spend too much time on this next one. This isn't an official Queens album. This is a collaboration that Josh Homme did with Dave Grohl and John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin. They made their own little supergroup called Them Crooked Vultures, released in 2009, I believe. And it's just, I mean, just to put it blunt and simple, it's a phenomenal hard rock album. That's really all I can say. I just wanted to include it on the list just to give it a 9, just to give an extra album to talk about in there really quick. And I do, excuse me, I do love it. It has a ton of great rockers on it, like I said. Some standouts being Elephants, Gunman, New Fang, and then No One Loves Me and Neither Do I, amongst a whole bunch of others. There's really no low point on this thing. I think it's great. And I didn't want to go too in depth on it, but I don't think it gets the credit it deserves. It is definitely an A tier. If it was an official Queens album, then I think that's where it would go. I'm technically not going to include it as a part of the list. I'm just going to put it on there anyway, just for fun. And I definitely think it is worth a listen if you are if you're at all a fan of the band and have not heard it, but I highly doubt that's anybody. Moving on to 2013 with Like Clockwork, there was a 6-year gap between Era Vulgaris and this album. And this was the very first Queens album that I heard on release. I became a fan of the band back in 2013 from my dad introducing me to them. And the wait for this album wasn't much of a wait, but I basically binged all of their albums waiting for this one to come out. I was so excited. Me and my dad listened to it together the day it came out, and my god, this album is freaking awesome. Which, I mean, if you've seen like top 10, maybe not top 10, but like top 25, top 50 albums of the decade, you've probably seen this on a lot of lists, and for good reason. It is great. It is definitely a return to form for the band, but this one has something that none of their other records do, and that is a great flow between the tracks. One thing I will critique about Queens is there's like a hard wall between their songs. There's like barely any flow, and I love when albums flow track by track with each other. One of my favorites being In the Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel has a phenomenal flow. Francis the Mute from the Mars Volta has a phenomenal flow. And it's really just not something the band does, which isn't terrible, but this album does it, and it does it good. Every track flows into the next one so smoothly, so perfectly, and it's just awesome. The opener, Keep Your Eyes Peeled. Ooh, God. It's so weird, it's so eerie, it's so awesome. Sounds like nothing the band's ever made before, but in a good way. It's like a disturbing stage play almost. And then the second song, I Sat by the Ocean. Oh, such a heavy hitter. When I heard the single for the first time back waiting for the album, I was just like, oh my god, this is going to be great. And then The Vampire of Time and Memory, next track, is a slower track, but I think it serves its purpose to kind of be a leeway from one heavy hitter to the next heavy hitter, which is If I Had a Tail, which is actually the track where all the original members came back for just one time. Nick Oliveri, Dave Grohl, Mark Lanigan, and Josh Homme all play on that track. Excuse me, and it shows. It is really good, and I think it's definitely a standout on the album. After that follows is My God Is the Sun, which is the second single on the album, also a high point. It's just great. The only track on the album, or the only song I'm not as big on is Calopsia, which is the one that follows My God Is the Sun. It serves its purpose, I just think it's a worse version of Vampire in Time and Memory, personally. But it's still a good song. It's still like a 7 out of 10 song on a 9 out of 10 album. And it's like, it's barely a step down. And then after that is Smooth Sailing, which is just so groovy. And then you have the two best back-to-back songs in their entire discography being I Appear Missing and Like Clockwork, which I think are their second and third best song, right back to back, right after Misfit Love. I think that those are their second and third best tracks. I Appear Missing is devastating, it is gorgeous, it is brutal, it is everything I would want out of a Queen song and more. It's long, it's scary, and it's perfect. It's perfect. And then we have Like Clockwork, their second, or the last track of the album, which is not only their best closer, in my opinion, but it is, again, their third best song of all time. The piano ballad at the beginning is beautiful. The intros, or the middle section where the guitars come in, it gives me goosebumps every single time. Then it leads back into the piano section at the end. Oh, perfect. Absolutely perfect. God, I love this album so freaking much. And I'm so glad that it was my first time hearing one of their albums come out while I was a fan of the band. And for that, I have to give it an S tier. It's not a 10 out of 10, which is why it's behind this one. Which actually, I'm going to go ahead and move that up. It's behind Songs for the Deaf because I do think Songs for the Deaf is a 10. Like Clockwork isn't quite there because I don't think it is as important. Also, it has Calypso, which is just kind of meh. But besides that, stellar album, highly worth a listen in my opinion, and I totally recommend it. And now we get to Villains. After Like Clockwork, I was hyped. I was hyped as shit for this album. Me and my dad were so excited that for his birthday, we got to Target and we bought it and we listened to it like 2 or 3 times because we had a bunch of errands that day, so we had to go back and forth. We listened to the whole thing like 3 times over, and for me, being the younger kid I am, I loved it. I thought it was perfect. I thought it was 10 out of 10, amazing. And looking back on it now as an adult, it is not. It is not a 10 out of 10, not even close. It's still a good album, in my opinion. I don't think Queens has a single bad album in their discography, which is why they're so impactful, they're so important to me, is because a lot of rock groups have that one album, that one that's just like, yeah, that sucks. Not Queens, though. They're one of the few bands I would say that don't have that album. And the main thing holding this album back is it's not the lyrics, it's not the singing, it's not the instrumentation, no. It is the production. The production is terrible. It is awful. I do not know why the hell the production decisions made on this were made, considering how amazing Like Clockwork sounds. I do not know what happened here. I cannot remember who produced it, but good God, so many of these songs would be so much better if they had better production. Especially, the thing that got hit the worst is the drums. The drums on this sound like you're hitting a wet piece of cardboard with sticks. They sound like shit. They do not sound good at all. And it's a damn shame because I already like songs like Domesticated Animals and Head Like a Haunted House. I like those songs a lot. But they would be even better. They would be on the same level as like these if it just had better production. If I could actually hear the damn drums. When Josh is singing on a lot of these tracks, you can't even hear anything else that's playing. And it's a damn shame. It really sucks because I hate, having to critique my favorite band of all time this hard, but again, coming from a critique's perspective, it has to be done. It really does. Feet Don't Fail Me Now, good opener, but again, it'd be better if the production was better. I do love the super long opening. I do think that is really awesome. The Way You Used to Do is one of their worst songs ever. I do not know why that was the single. I really think the single should have been Head Like a Haunted House. The single that we got did not leave good impressions. I remember when I first heard it, I was a little bit worried, but I was still hyped for the rest of the album. But it just does not leave a good impression. It is not good. It sounds dated, and it only came out 7 years ago, which sounds like a long time, but compared to a lot of other albums, that's nothing. Domesticated Animals is good, but again, like I said, it'd be even better with better production. Fortress is one of the band's best songs, in my opinion. I know a lot of people clown on it, but the fact that it was made for his daughter and it just sounds so emotional really hits with me, and I can really relate to it, even though I personally don't have a child yet. It is just something I feel like anyone can relate to, and it has some very tender and sweet lyrics. Head Like a Haunted House is great, I already said that. And then we get into a section of the album I'm not a fan of at all. Unreborn Again, I do not like. I don't think it needs to be the length that it is. I like the saxophone on it, but again, I wish I could actually hear it compared to everything else playing. And then when you do hear it, it blocks out every other instrument, and you can't hear anything else. Hideaway is probably the band's most forgettable song ever. Like, I never listen to it, ever, unless I'm doing a full album listen. I don't know why they even included it. Personally, I would rather it have just been 8 tracks and taken that off. Actually, I'd rather it be 7, because it can take the Way You Used to Do off, too. Yeah, that's another thing. This is their shortest album. Track-wise, I wish they could have just thrown one more in there. Or they could have given us 2 others to replace the 2 bad ones, and then given us another and given us 10. That would have been better, but you can only dream, I guess. I do really like The Evil Has Landed. I think that's one of the tracks that does sound really good, even with the production that was chosen. I still think it sounds good. And then Villains of Circumstance, the closer, it's a good song. It's very pretty. It's, again, for his kids. But again, I wish it sounded better. I really do. I think that the acoustic version is better. Not to say that the studio version is bad. It's just a personal thing. But yeah, Villains is just, it's a letdown compared to the masterpiece, in my opinion, that Like Clockwork was, and I'm going to go ahead and have to put it in the C tier. I think this is the worst that they ever get, but I think a C tier is, like, if that's the worst your band gets, then that's a pretty big achievement, in my opinion. And then we have their most recent album, In Times New Roman, came out in 2023, last year. 6-year gap between this and Villains. Big reasons why: Josh Homme, his wife, divorced him. I believe he was having issues with his children, and that kind of got in the way. But I'm glad that I for a long time thought that Villains was their last record, so I'm very glad that they pulled together and finally made their 8th album. Was it worth the wait? Yes and no. I like it, but it has a lot of issues. One of those issues is, again, the production. Not as bad as Villains' production is, but a lot of the stuff on here still sounds weak. A lot of it just does still not mesh well with each other, and I wish it did mesh better. Because again, a lot of these songs would be better if they had better production. But I don't know, maybe they were going through some hardships financially and that's all they could afford. I have no idea. There's still a lot of highlights though. Obscenery is okay. I haven't been too big of a fan of it. Paper Machete is great. I think that is a great choice as a single. I always forget what that third track is. It's Negative Space. That's what it is. Another one of the band's most forgettable songs. Not really a fan of that one at all. Time and Place is good. I really like the swing, groove, rhythm on that song. Made to Parade, I know a lot of people don't really praise it. I'm going to, because I think it is one of their most underrated songs. It is amazing. Not the whole song, but the second half is one of the best sections of any Queen song, in my opinion. It is so devastating, and I freaking love it. Carnivore Is that what it's called? Carnivoyeur or something like that. Not too big of a fan of that one either. The chorus on that is one of the worst choruses they've ever made, and it's so sloppy and lazy. And I think with a better chorus and a better flow through the song, it would be better. But it is what it is. What the people say is good. Sicily, it's okay. And then we have the main single of the band, or not the main single of the album, "Emotion Sickness," which I do like quite a bit. I listened to it a ton when it first dropped, and I remember it getting me hyped for the album. I didn't listen to any of the other singles. I only listened to that because I like to be surprised for most of the album when it comes out. So that was the only one I listened to, and I think it was definitely a good choice picking that for the single because it is great, and it's probably the second or third best song on the album. And the clothes were straitjacket fitting is awesome. I love it to death. I think it's awesome that it's their longest song. It's really cool. Has a lot of different sections, which makes it feel kind of like the Bohemian Rhapsody or the Paranoid Android of Queens, which I do really like. And though it's not as good as those two, I think it's cool that they went for that style for a song because they really haven't done it before. So yeah, I mean, overall, it's a step up from Villains, but it's not as big of a step up as I would want. A lot of great songs. There are a lot of mixed bags, which is similar to. I think it's the most similar in that case to Rated R because Rated R has a lot of great songs and mixed bags too, in my opinion. And for that, I think it's going to go in the B tier with it. I think actually, yeah, we'll keep it like that. I think that's good. And there we go. That is my complete Queens of the Stone Age tier list. Going from worst to best, Songs for the Deaf is obviously my favorite, being a 10 out of 10. I think it's their best. My personal favorite's Era Vulgaris, but these three albums right here are like a must listen in my opinion. If you haven't heard them, they are a must listen. Love these three albums to death. And then I also think that these two and this one are ones that you should highly check out after you've heard those three. And then these three are ones that I'm like, yeah, you could check out, like if you're a diehard fan, but I don't think they're a super necessary aspect. But I mean, hey, I love all these albums. I've grown up listening to this band. It's the band that got me into music thanks to my father, and I would not be the same without it. So, do they deserve their status? I think so. I think they actually deserve to be bigger because they've done so much that no other band has, and I think that is really commendable. Even though Josh Homme isn't that great of a person, I do think that he is an amazing guitar player. I think he's a great vocalist, a great lyricist, and not only that, he is the only one for Queens. He's the only one. No one can ever replace him. And yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure to stay in touch for the next episode of Toon Talk. Thanks.